Mitch, it's time to get to the meat of this podcast. And you heard the draft and you heard our playoff talk. It's a lot of fun. But as Mitch teased earlier, we're going to do a bracket. We're bringing back the bracket on the podcast. We did this a couple months ago around March Madness. We did a bracket of the best college team names in the land. And we had a lot of fun with that. We ended up with the Rainbow Warriors, right? That was our champion, the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, which I still stand by to this day. That feels great. Feels like the right pick in a couple months in retrospect. But we're back with another bracket today. And for today's Sports Hour bracket, we are going to determine the best defensive player in NFL history. And I love the idea of doing this in a bracket, Mitch, because this conversation is a little nuanced, a little subjective, right? I mean, there's multiple positions, there's different eras. Like, how do you determine greatness? You could kind of go a different way, a number of different ways in this. So why not stick these 16 guys, put them head to head to come down to the end to determine who was the greatest defensive player in NFL history? I think we're going to get there, and I feel like we'll be 100% confident in our pick. I believe that.
I'll tell you what, this was an impossible bracket to make. Like, we left so many good players off this bracket that we'll, of course, I mean, I'm sure they'll come up in conversations as we go through this bracket at some point, but an impossible bracket to make. But this is going to be a lot of fun to go and narrow down who is the greatest defensive player of all time.
Don't hate us for who we left off, all right? Because there were only 16 spots. So we had to be judicious and not overcrowd this thing and give respect to all eras, right? That was important too. So that's what we got, Mitch. Are we ready?
I think we're ready.
Shall we do this thing? Okay.
Let's get into it, man.
You can see it on the screen here. We've got our bracket 1 through 16. And let's start at the top with the 1-16 matchup. And the 1 seed is Lawrence Taylor. That's easy. The longtime Giants edge rush. That was we were 100% in consensus on that. He had to be the number 1. But a tough matchup with the 16 seed of Brian Urlacher, the legendary linebacker for your Chicago Bears. Mm-hmm. Got one of the greatest defensive players of all time and one of probably your favorite players of all time, Mitch. How do you sit on this matchup?
Very uncomfortably. This is not a comfy matchup for me, because I know what the right answer is, and I don't want to say it, but I have to. Look, Brian Urlacher was incredible. He was actually a safety coming out of New Mexico, and they asked him to put on 30 pounds of muscle and become a middle linebacker because he just had that incredible football IQ. Of course, he filled that role perfectly and served the Bears valiantly for many years and was a lifetime Bear. Will continue to be a lifetime Bear. Once a Bear, always a Bear. But Lawrence Taylor, in my mind, and I'm just going to come out in the first round and say this right out of the gate, is the greatest football player who ever walked the face of the earth. He just had so many things that he could do well. Rush the passer, be a run stopper, play in zone coverage, play in man coverage. Lawrence Taylor, LT is just he's the man. He gets my vote in this one.
Yeah, it's got to be LT. I am right there with you. So we will pick Lawrence Taylor here for the oh my goodness, for the first selection when I get back to the bracket.
Oh boy,
Lawrence Taylor.
Lawrence, there we go. All right,
there we go. I do want to give some love real quick to Brian Urlacher because we won't talk about him anymore. 9th all-time in tackles in NFL history, Hall of Famer, one-time Defensive Player of the Year, 8 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pros. I mean, just an incredible career and more than deserving to be in this conversation and in this list. So I'm glad we included him, but. Yeah, LT all the way there, Mitch. The 8-9 matchup. This is an interesting one. We've got Neon Dion. These players couldn't be almost more different. We've got Deion Sanders versus Dick Butkus in the 8-9 matchup. the 8 seed Dion versus 9 seed Butkus. And, Mitch, I'll start on this one. I know you're going to have an affinity for Dick Butkus, the another legendary Bears linebacker, one of many on this top 16. And for the game, for the history of the linebacker position, and when we look at some of the legendary players of the past, he is absolutely in that conversation, deserving to be here. But Deion Sanders, though his career was maybe not as long as a lot of guys, was one of the most prolific defensive players in his prime time of all time. 53 career interceptions, 9 touchdowns in 188 games, 6-time All-Pro player and a Defensive Player of the Year. My pick is going to be for Deion Sanders on this one. I think we got to go Deion. As much as I would love to give the respect to Dick Butkus, he's too good to pass on this one.
Dick Butkus is exactly what a linebacker should be. He is the prototype. He's the big-bodied, mean, nasty. I'm going to rip your arm out of its socket. And then while I'm laying on top of you at the bottom of the pile, I'm going to tell you, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. And he does it every single time. You watch some of the old highlight tapes of Dick Butkus, and it's like vicious what he does to people. I mean, he is what you look for in a linebacker. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Deion Sanders ushered in the modern era of football. And while Dick did, it basically laid the foundation for what the prototype linebacker should look like, Deion ushered in an entire era. You mentioned the accolades already. He was a dual sport athlete for a while.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love Dick Butkus, I'm going to save my vote for a Bears linebacker, and I'm going to give it to Deion.
Okay, we'll go Deion Sanders here, and we'll move on to the 5-12 matchup. And these are all great matchups, but fun one here on the defensive line. The 5 seed Bruce Smith, the all-time sacks leader in the NFL, against Mean Joe Green, one of the most iconic, legendary defensive players of all time. I mean, a nickname like that just gets included in your name is incredible. Mean Joe Green, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 10-time Pro Bowler, 77.5 sacks over 181 games. But then Bruce Smith, again, as we said, leader in all-time sacks, 200 career sacks, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 11 Pro Bowls, 8 All-Pros, 279 games in his career, long career. And that's how he gets those numbers. Obviously, doesn't have sort of this, he's not the standout like a Lawrence Taylor is on the edge, like we've talked about, but endurance, long career, has the accolades. I love Mean Joe Green, but I feel like for me, I'd be leaning Bruce Smith here.
Yeah, this is tough. This is a tough one. I mean, all of these are going to be tough, but for me, Bruce Smith was the quintessential sack artist. And that's reflected in his career statistics. He's the all-time sack leader for a reason, right? He was a part of that built those Bills teams that made it to 4 straight Super Bowls. Had a quick stint there, I believe, with Washington at the end of his career where he got his 200th sack. Bruce Smith Bruce Smith carried a defense. I think you could say that he carried a brunt of that Bills defense. I mean, there was I think Talley was on that defense as well, but Bruce Smith was the guy in that defense. And I think compared to Mean Joe, man, he was a part of that steel curtain defense that had a lot of great players on it. Jack Lambert, Jack Ham. There's 2 names right there we left off that we were considering. Mel Blount was on those teams. So you look at what Mean Joe had around him compared to what Bruce Smith had around him. Bruce Smith really carried that defense a lot further, carried more of that defense than what Mean Joe did with his. So I'm going to be on your side here, and I'm going to go with Bruce Smith.
Okay, we're in agreement here. Bruce Smith advances. So far, the top seed's all advancing. We'll see if we get an upset here at some point. Next matchup, Mitch, 13-4 matchup, we've got a couple linebackers, legendary linebackers. We've got the third Bears linebacker on the list, Mike Singletary, who is the 13 seed, taking on Ray Lewis, the 4 seed, the all-time leader in tackles in NFL history. Ray Lewis, 2,059 tackles over his career of 228 games. Both these guys, 2-time defensive players of the year. I mean, both guys have all the accolades in the world supporting this argument. This is a tough one, Mitch. I'll let you go first here on your thoughts. We got another Bears player in here. I know that's tough for you. Ray Lewis is the higher seed, and I mean, Ray Lewis is Ray Lewis. So how are you? Where are you thinking here?
Two players that were so exceptionally similar yet so exceptionally different. The intensity with which both played, right? Ray Lewis was the oorah guy. He was the talker. He was the one that was yelling and getting everyone hyped up, the trash talker. I mean, and he backed it up with his play, of course. There's a reason they called Mike Singletary Samurai Mike. And it's because he played with a quiet demeanor around him. But the level of intensity, make no bones about it, was the same for both of them. In my opinion, Mike Singletary did first what everything Ray Lewis did. Mike Singletary was the original Ray Lewis as far as playing with that level of intensity. And so I'm going with my boy Samurai Mike to move on over Ray Lewis.
Yeah, I knew you would, and I totally get it. And Mike Singletary is definitely deserving to be in here. When it comes down to it, and these two players, when you're comparing them, all the similarities are there. Career-wise, very similar. Again, Ray Lewis played longer, so he has, a chance to kind of rack up more accolades, get the tackle, record and whatnot. But I just don't think there were players that incited as much fear, that had the aggression and the theatrics on defense the way that Ray Lewis did. I mean, the way he would come out, his iconic, arching his back and screaming into the air. I mean, you remember this as a kid. You just watched that and you're like, I would be scared shitless of that guy. I don't want him tackling me at all. And NFL players, grown adults, felt like that as well, playing against him for all those years. And so that just stands out for me with Ray Lewis, and that makes this really hard for me to not go with Ray Lewis on this one.
So the argument I will make is that Mike Singletary did the same thing. He just did it quietly. If you ever listen to old players that played against Mike Singletary talk about Mike Singletary, they'll say that he had this look in his eyes, like a serial killer that was just, he was there to end you. He didn't have to hoorah. He didn't have to do all the theatrics. All he had to do was give you the look, and you knew you were in for a long day with Mike. And so that's kind of where I differentiate these things. And, of course, old school Mitch coming out. I'm going to go with the old school mentality of intimidation over the theatrics of Ray Lewis. But I understand why you're going with Ray, but I'm still sticking with Mike. I'm sticking with Mike here.
What's our tiebreaker?
I got a coin.
You want to flip? We have flip a coin. Okay, I'm down. We'll flip a coin for Ray Lewis, Mike Singletary here, and I think that's fitting because this is really like these guys are so neck and neck. So deserving.
Heads, tails.
Okay, heads was Jesus. Okay, yep. Yeah. Am I calling it in the air? Heads.
Oh yeah, sorry. No, I'll flip again. Sorry.
Okay.
Ready?
Now I gotta go tails now.
Tails.
Yep.
It is tails.
Okay. It is tails, and Ray Lewis will advance. No upset in the 13-4 matchup. The coin flip gives it to Ray Lewis. That's a tough call, Mitch. None of your Bear linebackers made it through, but they had some tough matchups there. They had some tough matchups in the first round, so we didn't make it easy on them. Yeah. Another great matchup here in the 3-14. Couple legendary safeties. 3 seed Ronnie Lott. 14 seed, Ed Reed. Ed Reed, man. What an incredible career for Ed Reed. 7th in career interceptions, 9 Pro Bowls, 5 All-Pros, 64 interceptions over his 174-year career. Ronnie Lott on the other
174-year career.
174-game career.
Holy smokes.
Played since the Civil War.
That's exactly
But Ronnie Lott, surprising. Ronnie Lott's one of those defensive players you think of when you think of the greats. He never won a defensive player of the year, never got the recognition in an individual season for that, but was a 10-time Pro Bowler, a 6-time All-Pro, 63 picks for him in 192 games that he played. Yeah, I mean,
this is a dead heat.
This, much like Singletary and Ray Lewis, this is like kind of comparing very similar players from different eras. I could accept an argument from either one. I guess I'd lean Ronnie Lott here, but I wouldn't argue with Ed Reed. What are you thinking?
This might be the tightest matchup we have in the first round.
Yeah.
Again, it's similar to the Singletary Lewis deal. Same outcome, two completely different approaches. I'm gonna lean. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know, Dallen. I don't know. He's ED Reed, boy, the best you ever seen, boy. Like he was terrifying. He was terrifying. It was him, Troy Polamalu, and Brian Dawkins. Those were the three in that time era that were just terrifying safeties. If you ran a route over the middle, night, dirt nap, you're going to sleep because these guys are absolutely going to light you up. Ronnie Lott did the same thing, though.
Yeah.
He was the originator of this slide, if you will. Give me Ronnie Lott. Give me the OG Ronnie Lott.
I'm with you. I love Ed Reed, and I really want to take Ed Reed here, but Ronnie Lott was just too good to get bounced in the first round. I just feel like we can't bounce him in the first round out of principle. He's that legendary of a player. So
yeah,
we'll take Ronnie Lott in the 3-14, and that sets up the 11-6 matchup. Mitch, Deacon Jones, legendary defensive lineman, third all-time in NFL history in sacks, versus a current player. Yes, we put a current player on here because it's Aaron freaking Donald, who, by the way, is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 9-time Pro Bowler, 7-time All-Pro player in only 138 games. The start to this guy's career has been incredible. If it ended now, obviously, an easy Hall of Famer, but he's here as an 11 seed, Mitch, and I think Aaron Donald has a really strong case. As great as a career for Deacon Jones was, and again, third all-time in sacks, 173 over his career of 191 games, 8-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, but I think Donald has a pretty good case too.
Look, Deacon Jones, here's why. Obviously, the numbers speak for itself with Deacon Jones, but he was the originator of the term sack.
Yeah.
He's the one who came up with the term sack. I'm sacking the quarterback. So he's a pioneer in a sense, as well as including all the accolades and the numbers that he has. But I don't think we've ever seen, a guy come into the NFL and be as dominant from the get-go and maintain that dominance like we've seen Aaron Donald do.
Yeah.
And again, completely different eras. It's tough to compare guys that were in completely different eras, but
yes,
the dominance that Aaron Donald has sustained from the word go is unmatched, and I don't think we'll ever see it again. And in that position, the defensive line position, for a guy that's undersized for his position to sustain this type of dominance, the physical freak that he is, strength-wise, give me the upset. I'm going to go Aaron Donald over Deacon Jones.
I'm with you, Mitch. We'll take the upset in this one, and I love that this matchup is between two Rams defensive linemen that are from 50 years apart. Deacon Jones playing the majority of his career in the 60s, Aaron Donald here in the 2020s doing his thing.
If you ask these two who was a better player, God rest his soul, Deacon Jones would say, oh, Aaron Donald is. And I guarantee you Aaron Donald would go, no, Deacon Jones is.
Yeah.
I guarantee you
Yep.
that's exactly how they'd answer it. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's how close it is, and
Yep.
the respect amongst those guys. So,
but I'm with you there. What we've seen on Aaron Donald is unprecedented. It is incredible, and we need to appreciate it as it's happening. Even though that's hard to do in sports, it's easy to look back and appreciate guys. We have a hard time appreciating certain players in the moment and where they sit in the historical context. What Aaron Donald has done and is doing is incredible, and he is definitely one of the best. So yeah, the first upset on the board, Aaron Donald over Deacon Jones, the 11-6. 2 matchups left in the first round, Mitch. A Woodson matchup here. We had to do this. This was too easy. Number 7, Rod Woodson. Number 10, Charles Woodson. The safety versus the corner. Listen, Rod Woodson had a long career, 238 games. As a result, he's third all-time in interceptions, 71 career interceptions. He was an 11-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro. Great player, but a lot of longevity for Rod Woodson in his career. Charles Woodson played even longer, 254 games, 9-time Pro Bowler. He's tied for 5th in career interceptions with 65, so just behind Rod Woodson. Comparable long careers of really high level play. The 7-10 matchup seems fitting because those are pretty close teams. It's not, super gap between those. I think this is pretty competitive. I'm curious where you're leaning in this one.
Rod Woodson was, they say when you're playing safety, you got to play center field, right? You have to cover sideline to sideline through the air. And Rod Woodson did that better than I think anyone in the history of the game. He could lay the boom when he wanted to, but damn it, he was a great coverage safety, the best we've ever seen. Charles Woodson was fantastic. We even saw him transition to safety for a minute there in Green Bay during his time there. But Rod Woodson exemplifies the perfect coverage safety in my mind, a true ball hawk. I have to give it to Rod Woodson.
I'm with you there. I'm glad we included Charles Woodson in this exercise because I do think he's deserving with the resume that he put up over his career. But Rod Woodson's one of the greats. Definitely should get past in this round. We'll give it to him in the 7-10. And finally, Mitch, the 2-15 matchup. 2 seed Reggie White versus the 15 seed Alan Page. And you may not be super familiar with Alan Page. He is 8th all-time in sacks. He is a MVP. That's right. A defensive lineman, a defensive tackle who won the MVP in 1971. 9-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, 148.5 sacks over his career, and deserving to be on here. What he did at that era, again, played in, late 60s through the 70s. But this is a 2-15 for a reason, Mitch, because Reggie White has a hell of a case for the greatest defensive player of all time with what he did in his career. So I think this is a tough one for Alan Page here, and it's got to be Reggie White.
Look, Alan Page was the original Aaron Donald, physically imposing. He was a part of that Purple People Eaters defense in Minnesota. Jim Marshall, I think, was on that team. This was just the OG Aaron Donald, physically imposing, dominating. It's self-evident in his accolades, his MVP award in 1971. But I mean, come on, we're talking about Reggie White here. We can't put Reggie White out in the first round. We have to give it to Reggie.
Easy. The 2 advances, and we move on to the next round of the bracket. We'll go back up to the top, Mitch, for the 1-8 matchup, and we've got Lawrence Taylor, LT, versus Deion Sanders. This is a hell of a matchup. We talked about these players quite a bit. Now we got to stack up the defensive linemen in the corner here. Listen, I love Neon Deion. The accolades, the charisma, that the diva corner that we know today, started with Deion, right? That sort of mentality that, seeing like the Jalen Ramseys and those sort of types of corners, it started with Deion. That being said, I mean, Lawrence Taylor has got to advance here. I'm sorry, Deion. It's a good try.
I mean, the more I think about this matchup, the more I just realize this is a blowout. I mean, it's a blowout. It's LT.
Yeah.
It's LT. This was Kentucky against VCU. I mean, this was not even close.
Yeah,
not even close.
Yeah, tough draw for Dion. There's the 8th seed, but that's what happens. This one, though, Mitch, this is going to be a tough one. The 5-4 matchup for a chance to take on Lawrence Taylor, and we've got the 4 seed Ray Lewis, who gets past Mike Singletary on the coin flip, and the 5 seed, the all-time sacks leader, Bruce Smith. I think this is an interesting comparison here. I think what's gonna edge me towards Ray Lewis on this one, Mitch, is that Bruce Smith, yes, has the sack total because of his 279 games played. I feel like Ray Lewis was more dominant, maybe in a shorter span than Bruce Smith was, maybe more so over the course of his entire career. Obviously, he had some dominant years, don't get me wrong, but I feel like I may be leaning Ray Lewis on this one. Where are you sitting here?
I think that you could make the same argument for Ray Lewis and the tackles numbers. Like, he played for 16 years. Like, of course he's gonna.
Yeah, he also played 228 games.
He plays in a position that warrants a lot of tackles. Right, second level, it warrants a ton of tackles. But as I kind of play this comparison through my head, who's the more well-rounded, better football player? It's Ray Lewis.
Yeah.
It's Ray Lewis. Bruce Smith was a fantastic football player, a sack artist in the highest degree. But Ray Lewis is the more complete defensive player. And so I'm going with Ray Lewis in this one.
Okay. I like it. I'm with you on Ray Lewis as well. I won't argue that. One of my favorite players, Mitch. He's
one of mine too. Yeah.
I'm rooting for him in this bracket. I'm not going to lie. There's bias there for me. The 3-11 matchup. This is a good one. Ronnie Lott, the 3 seed, and our one upset from the first round, the 11th seed, Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald able to get past Deacon Jones for the upset, the current NFL player for the Rams. Can he get past Ronnie Lott here? Mitch, what do you think?
Much like the Dion LT matchup, this is a blowout in the upset fashion. I have a hard time justifying that Ronnie Lott is going to, when it's all said and done, when Aaron Donald wraps up his career, is going to have the better career over Aaron Donald. Like I mentioned, the dominance from the word go. I mean, from the starting gun, Aaron Donald has been dominant and has not lifted his foot off the gas pedal yet. And so for those reasons alone, and Ronnie Lott's a tough draw because, there's a lot of great defensive backs in NFL history.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to come across a defensive lineman that has the pedigree and has been as good as Aaron Donald has been throughout the course of his career. So I'm going Aaron Donald here.
Hey, Mitch, I will agree with you here. I won't fight you on this one. And I think, and listen, when we get down to it, we got to start really parsing out, the little details of these resumes. Ronnie Lott never won Defensive Player of the Year, was never the best defensive player for a season in his career, could never get that award. And Donald's already won it 3 times. And based on what he looks like now, I mean, if he wants to keep playing, he could win another one. That's a different type of player, I think, despite what Ronnie Lott was able to put together for his career. So I'm with you. We'll go Aaron Donald. Upset again, headed to the Final Four. You'll love to see it, Mitch. And the final matchup here, Rod Woodson, the 7 seed, and Reggie White, the 2 seed. I kind of feel like I feel on this one the way that you felt about the 1-8 matchup. I think this is a very big Reggie White victory. As great as Rod Woodson was, as great as his career was, Reggie White, second all-time in sacks, 13 Pro Bowls, 8 All-Pro selections, and 198 career sacks. That's hard to get past. That is hard to get past for anybody, especially here for Rod Woodson.
DBs are going to have a really tough time in this bracket. And it's shown, and so it's Reggie. It's Reggie.
Okay. We'll go Reggie White here. The Final Four.
These are two matchups that I am not looking forward to finding an answer to.
I just want to say, first off, I would never have guessed that this was the Final Four. But when we started, when we put this together, I don't think I would have guessed that this was our Final Four. But here we are, and we'll start with the 1-4 matchup. Number 1, Lawrence Taylor versus number 4, Ray Lewis. Sugar Ray. He's just iconic in my mind. Again, as we were talking about, his entrance, his play style, just everything about him. He had a swagger to him. And I just appreciate still to this day, and I think makes him stand out among the great defensive players in NFL history. But Lawrence Taylor is Lawrence Taylor and won a freaking MVP in the mid-'80s, by the way. Like, no disrespect to Alan Page, but he won an MVP in 1971, right? The NFL was a way different place in 1971 than it was 15 years later when Lawrence Taylor won an MVP, where you had legitimate running backs and quarterbacks and legitimate players putting up numbers, and you still had a defensive player coming over top and winning that award. So love Ray Lewis. I want to say that and give him all the love in the world because he's one of my favorite players of all time. But it's got to be LT, right, Mitch?
Here's the difference between Lawrence Taylor and Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis, a fantastic player. Lawrence Taylor changed games.
Yeah.
He changed the outcome of games with his play. Yep. Got to go LT. Have to.
We will go the 1 seed. Lawrence Taylor advanced to the finals, and Mitch on the other side.
This one sucks.
Aaron Donald, Reggie White. This is, and listen, I love that Donald has made it this far because I really believe he deserves it. He deserves this recognition for his career already and what he's accomplished. He's a 7-time All-Pro in like 8 seasons. I mean, he's made the Pro Bowl in all 9 years of his career. He's never missed a Pro Bowl, Mitch. Since his rookie year, he's been a Pro Bowl player. Like you said earlier, since day one, he's been that guy. 20 sacks in 2018. Aaron Donald is just legit. But, Reggie White.
He's Reggie White.
White was also legit. 198 career sacks. 1,111 tackles in 232 games. So, Aaron Donald has 103 sacks in 138 games. Reggie White, 198 sacks in about 100 more games. So, technically, if Aaron Donald keeps this pace and plays as long as Reggie White does, he'll set the record for sacks all time based on where he's at right now. The problem is Donald's probably got 3 or 4 years and then he's going to be done. It could be less than that. Who knows? He talked about retiring after they won the Super Bowl. So we don't know how long we'll have him, but I love that Aaron Donald got here, but I'm kind of like how I was on the other one. It's got to be Reggie White, right?
I think if we have 3, 4, 5 years more of Aaron Donald, this conversation changes.
Could be different.
Yeah. But I think as of right now, this is still clearly Reggie White. It still is. And we're talking about now in a 1-2 matchup in the bracket to wrap it off. This is an impossible decision. I think I know where I'm going, but it seems impossible in my mind.
These are the correct 2 names to be here at the end, right? I know I talked about before that there's a number of ways you can go with it. If you look at different positions, and if you look at different eras, you can come up with a number of different answers for the greatest defensive player in NFL history. But I think if you were going to pick 2 and debate them, in my mind, it's probably Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White. And I think it's pretty fitting that that's where we've ended up here in our bracket.
Yeah, you're right. And look, Reggie was much like Bruce Smith, the sack artist, but he did so much more for the game off the field. When we talk about greatness extends beyond the gridiron, right? So his contributions off the field are incredible. He was like the first big free agent signing, if I'm remembering correctly, when he left Philadelphia to go to Green Bay. LT though, just unmatched in his well-roundedness as a player. And he didn't just do 10 things good and 2 things great and 1 thing better than anyone else. He did all 13 things better than anyone else. Like, this was the guy during his career, and he played at the same time as Reggie White. So when you look at they played in the same era, Lawrence Taylor was still the guy over Reggie White. I'm sticking with my guns. Lawrence Taylor is the greatest defensive player and greatest football player of all time. I'm going LT.
Yeah, I do think this is an interesting argument between guys with different types of careers. Reggie White, much more like the Bruce Smith, much more like a couple players we've talked about before, had a long career, 200 plus games played, was able to rack up big numbers over the course of his career to where he's second all time in sacks, and he's got over 1,000 tackles, and he's able to rack up these big numbers. And then you have Lawrence Taylor, who didn't have as short of a career as some of the guys we've talked about. He played 184 games. Some of these shorter career guys like a Dion, he played at 188, but some of these flash in the pan. I mean, Aaron Donald's only played 138, but Taylor's more in that Donald range where he only played 12, 13 years, but man, was it a dominant decade that he just was instantly the guy, and he was the guy for that whole decade of his career. No matter what, even when there was Reggie White's there, even when there was other guys playing, he was always the dude. Despite only amassing 142 sacks in his career, because he didn't play quite as long, still 9th career sacks all time, won an MVP, 3-time defensive player of the year. It's got to be LT. It's got to be LT. So there you have it. Consensus here on the Sports Hour podcast: the greatest defensive player of all time in NFL history. We're saying Lawrence Taylor. And I think most would agree.
I think most would agree. I think that this is a consensus pick across the public, even.
Yeah.
That Lawrence Taylor is the greatest defensive player of all time. God, there were some tough matchups there. There were some really tough matchups. Was there anyone that you would have liked to see in the bracket, or that we left out, or?
Yeah, there's a couple names that I want to just bring up here. The guys that didn't make it, but I definitely considered and wanted to throw in there. J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt is one. Shorter career, 151 games, but 3-time defensive player of the year. He's sort of in that mold of when he was playing, he was the best player in the league and just dominated it. Michael Strahan was another one, 10th all-time in sacks, long career with the Giants. Champ Bailey, Darrelle Revis were the other two in the defensive backfield. Champ had a long career, 12 Pro Bowls, over 200 games. Darrelle Revis was Revis Island, shorter career, but dominated in it, and a Hall of Famer. So those were some of the names that I really wanted to consider here and wanted to put in, but didn't find a spot. What about you?
Yeah, I had some older guy names that I thought maybe could have made a substitution for some of the older guy names that we had up there. Randy White, Bob Lilly, Willie Lanier, Chuck Bednarik, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount, Randy White. I mean, Jack Youngblood. I mean, there was just so many big names that I before the podcast started, I advocated for Night Train Lane for a second.
Yeah.
There's just so many really, really good players that clearly we're not disrespecting them at all. We want them to have all the respect in the world for their careers and the players that they were. But darn it, I feel like we had the right 16 in there. I really do.
We certainly could have done 32 and had a deep list of names, and we still would have left great players off at the end of the day. That's why I thought this exercise would be fun, and I'm glad we did it today on the podcast. Let us know what you guys thought. Did we end up with the right player? Is it Lawrence Taylor? Do you think it should have been someone else? Do you think we missed somebody or had an egregious pick here? Let us know if you're watching live. Let us know in the comments if you're listening to the podcast here in the future, let us know on social media.